last about 3.5 years, I have been working on my educational doctorate here at Eastern in education and leadership and policy studies and social justice. It is a mouthful as we get through there. As you can see, my current working title for my dissertation is Credit for Prior Learning in Kentucky, the Case for a Public Agreement. And there'll be some things that I discuss in here that kind of move you through the journey to how I got to this point.
Is it not going to it?
Let's see, let's try.
Okay, try now.
There we go. Just a quick overview of my presentation. I promise it is not a long, boring presentation. It is pretty short and to the point. I kind of have my personal educational journey, my personal boots on the ground journey for how we got here. Some of my research that, some themes of my research that I have found so far, my current proposed study, and then time for question and answer. So for educational journey, I did go to a community college in upstate New York. That's where my family is originally from. As I was waiting to attend the State University of New York, or SUNY Geneseo. So I have some experience with college systems outside of the state of Kentucky and how they work differently from something like our KCTCS system. And then we moved to Kentucky in 2007. And I finished my associate in arts with BCTC in 2009. And then I did my undergraduate work at the University of Kentucky in communications. I knew by that point that I wanted to do something in student affairs at the college level. My sister was an admissions counselor at SUNY Geneseo and everything else. So I found a love of serving students at that point. And then as I was moving through, I got my master's of arts in student personnel and higher education here at Eastern. And then, like, as I said, I'm currently working on my EDD program. Hopefully we'll be able to finish by spring of next year. With the boots on the ground, it's a little bit of a resume, but just kind of so you know that I didn't just pick this topic at random. I had 10 years of volunteering with high school leadership students in a Hobie program. So I noticed that a lot of times those students kind of went on. I've always kept up with those students and they struggled a lot with trying to figure out how to get ahead with credits and stuff like that in school. So I started looking into it kind of about then. I was a Kentucky college coach here at Madison Central in Richmond. And also took on the role of Upward Bound through that summer. So I got to host and teach a class on getting into school for the juniors and seniors and things that they could be doing, seeing what kind of issues that our high school students were facing. It really opened my eyes to the fact that there really was a discrepancy in what the student knowledge base was as compared to what I thought it should be. As I was somebody coming from a family of people that obtained higher education degrees. I was not a first generation student, but I did have to start figuring out a lot of things for myself. The first school I went to, they all loved my sister. I could go into an office and they would take care of it for me. I came to Kentucky and I had to start figuring it out. And so I wanted to be that person for students as I kept continuing through my career. The college coaches led to a year of AmeriCorps Vista with our Kentucky, our Council on Post-Secondary Education, or CPE, in Frankfurt. That was with what they called the Kentucky College and Career Connection Coalition, KY3C. So I set up our corporate meeting, like our meetings every month, hosted our annual conference for that. So that was a very informative year with a lot of different people. And I got close with the Gear Up Kentucky, and I helped them finish out their last year of the previous grant that they held for Gear Up. And then I was a student development specialist with BCTC Winchester and Georgetown campus. This is where, you know, that transferring kind of really started in. The student development specialist, that's general academic advising, campus visits, recruiting, orientation, but really that transfer piece was I had a lot of students that were coming to me and saying, well, I want to go to EKU when I'm done here, or I want to go to UK, and helping them through that transfer process and figuring out how their credits are going to transfer. And sometimes helping them figure out, well, I've got military credits here, but that may not work over here at this school, and starting that process of trying to figure it out. And then almost for the last 5 years, it'll be 5 years in September. I have been with the Office of Articulation and Transfer Systems, used to be the Student Outreach and Transition Office, or SOTO. So been working with our transfer students since September of 2020. And with that, there has been, this is kind of where, like I said, that boots on the ground, kind of that knowledge that you can't almost put into data. I found that we got a lot of emails about, hey, what can I get for this? I've been doing manufacturing for this long and I have OSHA certifications, or I have been a trainer at my job. Do I really have to take communications? So all these students that had so many different life experiences that they want to come back to school, but they also want to be careful with their money. They want to be able to do something more quickly. And a lot of them don't, they see the value in the general education, but they don't necessarily want to be bogged down in having to take classes that they feel like they already have the information for. And so that's sort of the stuff we started seeing. And then as we transitioned into more of this, recording the transcripts and everything else, going to presentations like ACRO and learning about, since 2020 and the pandemic hit, you heard a lot about micro-credentialing. So things like Credly or Microsoft micro-credentialing and everything else, and how we might be able to stack those and actually be able to get them on a transcript somehow to be able to record and let those students know that we do value the learning. So just because it was not in a college classroom setting, that we do actually value and that we acknowledge that they have in fact done the work to achieve student learning outcomes that we have. And with that, when I decided to go back to school in 2021, don't know what I was thinking, but back to school. And I realized my original topic, when I started a couple years before that, was creativity in the classroom. Had no idea where I was going with that. But in coming back, I realized I really wanted to focus on transfer students. And then slowly it has transformed into this love of credit for prior learning, and figuring out how we can work that in with our students to better serve our students in those ways. And so instead of a long actual like literature review, boring study for you all, I have some themes that I have picked up on that a lot of the research is showing. And two of these, the Kale logo, as well as the ACE 2016 video, can both be clicked on when this slideshow goes out. The Kale logo goes straight to their research page. They have been the ones that have done the most cutting edge and relevant research in this field over the last 10 years in the United States. So they're the ones, when you see that, can save $1,500 to $10,000 by gaining some sort of CPL. Now, again, we've said this kind of over and over again, depends on if they're going to a 2-year, 4-year, private, public, all those different things. But the point is that the students are saving money, but they've done a lot of research into this. And another one you can kind of tell is that language makes a big difference when you're researching this kind of area. So for the longest time, I was only using the term credit for prior learning. And I was finding, why is all this research so old? I was getting 2009, 2011, 2013, sometimes in the 1990s. And it was driving me nuts, because as researchers and working on our dissertations and everything, we're taught you want the most relevant research you can find. And I wasn't finding it. And then I started to go down rabbit holes You'd find an article here and go down that rabbit hole. So I also learned about, other kind of ways to frame it. So prior learning assessment, or PLA. We have recognition of prior learning, RPL, credit mobility. Those are a lot of the different ways you will kind of see it. Internationally, it's generally addressed as prior learning assessment. Some of the, one of the biggest ones that shocked me, or I guess one of the statistics that shocked me, was, as I have on here, Hawthorne, and I know this is 2012, but it stuck with me because most students don't finish their degrees in 4 years. You see generally the trend has been about 5 to 6 years for completion. I know I was a 5-year bachelor's earner, just because of different things that had to go on. But 1/3 of first-time students will transfer or dual enroll in at least once in their first 5 to 6 years after first enrolling. So if you think about that, a dual credit student might enroll their junior year. So obviously between 5 and 6 years, they might transfer sometime before that 4-year degree is done. You know, you see in a lot of the research, up to 47% credit loss can be the average, for some students when they transfer schools. They notice that a lot of the difference can be mostly between different states, is one of the hardest. And then transfer pathways was another thing that kept coming up in a lot of the research, and how different states have been doing the research and doing the work to make transfer pathways between their 2-year and their 4-year schools, but not just as in associate in art, associate in science. That's mainly how we've always thought about those. Those other degrees don't count. Has kind of been, I think, the mentality. I know when I first started advising, that was the mentality that was given to me, was the applied ones, like, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to be doing anything after this. And that's just not the case. And that's not where industry is going. Industry is going more towards, we want a bachelor's degree of something in order for even some of these entry-level jobs. And so our students' needs are changing. And so creating these transfer pathways, Wellington in 2020, this was specific to Washington State. But I really enjoyed this article in particular because they were so thorough in looking at the policy in the state and how all of the schools came together, which is kind of what I am trying to do. So this one in particular is a big kind of citation in my literature review for my dissertation as it stands. And I do have it referenced in the back, so if you're interested in reading about it, it's a great one. And it also ties in well with Kale's research. Specifically, they looked at the entire United States. So obviously they couldn't do every single school and everything else, but it was a very comprehensive list that they went through to find that the benefits, again, for things like if you have somebody that's doing industrial maintenance and trying to move them into, you know, a business degree, or somebody that's doing cybersecurity at the 2-year school level and having it come into our 4-year cybersecurity bachelor's, things like that. Finding the best ways to help our students. We see it a lot with our law enforcement, fire science. A lot of those different areas are the ones that have jumped on board with this, because there are so many different ways of earning those credits and getting those agreements in place. More likely to persist completion by at least 17%. I've seen some of the statistics go as high as about 30% for increased retention of students if they earn at least 3 credit hours of credit for prior learning from the granting institution. On average, will take up to about a semester more of classes with you, because either they're trying to earn something else, or they just decide that, hey, I want to learn more about this. One of the reasons that I found for some of the challenges that a lot of people face is there's no real clarity of language. So as I showed just up here, there's 4 different ways of talking about credit for prior learning right now. that are the kind of major accepted ways that you could understand that. So clarifying the language, so we all have a common lexicon that we're going with in terms of that, is a big hurdle sometimes for people understanding what it is you're talking about in general. Streamline the processes, every man for themselves right now. Whether you are, and that's within state, out of state, in-state, school down the street, everybody has their own process. So the ability to kind of come up with those best practices like Kayla's done, and being able to implement those at your college level and still having that flexibility of being able to say, this process works well, but here's how you could make it work for your school if you have a little bit different way of doing it. Faculty involvement is a big one. It's not the first time that this topic has been around the block. This is something that about seems to be every 6 to 10 years has come back around since schools have started, but from my research, generally about the 80s is when this came around and was starting to gain momentum, and then it kind of fizzles out, and then it gains momentum and it fizzles out. It seems like this time it really is kind of maybe going the distance, especially in Kentucky, with initiatives that they are working on. I know Cassie's talked about EKU being part of a cohort here. That's one of the things that excites me about what I'm doing. EKU in general is one of the gold star standards. From the research I've been doing, they're the ones actually streamlining the process, clarifying the language, and having that involvement with the faculty. In a lot of the research, the problem that a lot of faculty have is that they're not being involved in the conversations, and their concerns aren't being taken into account when they're worried about, is this that academic rigor. In general, the rule is that faculty need to have a hold of what counts as courses at your institution. They hold that responsibility. And I've seen videos of other schools where that is not the case. The faculty have given up their hold on that in terms of credit evaluation. But that's one of the reasons why academic rigor, from the research I've found, is that when you have faculty involvement and faculty ownership of this and of these processes, it works a lot better for keeping that academic rigor standard intact. And then the other thing that Cassie and I had actually discussed is I've noticed a significant difference between schools that will dedicate CPL personnel or somebody specifically designed to coordinate, streamline, etc., credit for prior learning for that institution, versus those that it's tacked on as another role, so it gets left behind. So it really is a matter of making it a priority for that school. So in general, when you take a look at all of this, it really does make the case that we need a public agreement. So my proposed dissertation study, the goal of my study is I want to make that case for that public agreement, similar to what Kentucky has for the General Education Transfer Agreement, or GETA, that you might have heard about. That's for general education courses here in the state. So if you are certified in natural science by WKU and you transfer to EKU, you're automatically natural science certified. If you're fully certified from KCTCS, you're fully certified when you come to EKU, kind of no matter how that works out credit-wise. So something similar to that agreement, but in the form of CPL. So if you earn credit via portfolio from WKU, and they've given you their course of Management 300, if you come to EKU, we will treat it like they gave exactly like it is that they gave you that Management 300 and not make you go through that process again. Figuring out ways to do it. EKU, as I said, is one of the gold standards. We have one of the most liberal and generous policies for credit for prior learning in the state. But I also know that some of the other schools don't accept some of the credits I learned recently, that we will accept as well. So making that our goal is to serve our first generation, our Eastern Kentucky students. That's one of the barriers that I've seen a lot, is that, you know, that transfer of credit can be an issue. As a transfer student myself in my undergraduate, I learned that different credits did not transfer the way that I thought that they should. And that ended up costing me an extra semester of just having to take random classes because I needed an extra one class. And then specifically, these are my current research questions. These are subject to change and refinement, as I have not gone through my actual dissertation proposal yet with my committee. But currently, it is, to what extent would implementing a standardized credit for prior learning transfer agreement across higher education institutions enhance educational accessibility and degree completion rates while maintaining academic quality standards? Is there a difference in difficulty in obtaining CPL based on age? That's one that might be kind of future research, but kind of a way that I filter the data. And is there trouble transferring credit earned for CPL from one school to another? That one is more to discover the barriers that our students are actually coming against. I can tell you it's financial, it's the transferability and everything else, but you need the data to back up the stories. So I'm looking at a qualitative survey to accomplish this. I'm looking at choosing 3 of our public universities for obvious reasons and for other things. I will not be naming any of the universities that I'll be choosing to maintain the integrity of the study. And then we'll be choosing, I'll be matching a KCTCS institution closest to each of those universities to give the students to. The participants will be to have each of those schools send it out to all current students as well as alumni for feedback, and that they have to be 18 or older to avoid some extra steps in terms of IRB approval, et cetera, for students. So this would not be for dual credit students unless they are already 18. And then some of these are some of my sample questions right now, again, because it's not approved. But what types of CPL did you learn? Mark all or any that apply. So was it military credit, memorandum of agreement, credit by an exam such as AP, CLEP, Dante's, portfolio credit? Did you transfer this credit to another school? If yes, what if any issues? That would be left open-ended. So that's where we get the qualitative part to the study, is a lot of these questions. I want yes or no answers at first, but if they answer a certain way, it'll be left up to them to kind of give us that story, to kind of pull out a little bit more. What are these issues? Instead of me telling them, here are the issues I think it is. I want them to tell us what the issues are. What do you want to say about your CPL journey? Again, this is an open-ended one, kind of more to get that story. I'm one of those that I love the stories of our students and helping that individual. When they say, you know, you getting me that communications class really helped because I am so anxious when I give presentations, but I don't have to go through that now because I've done this, that, or the other thing in my career. So I didn't have to, you know, do that one class. That can make all the difference in the world to a student. And so having some of those stories, I wanted to give students the chance to do that without necessarily having to go in-depth interview style for the dissertation. How many credits have you earned through CPL? Only digits would be allowed in this, but it is an open-ended. I figured this is a lot easier to filter when it comes time for coding and analysis. Did earning CPL help you in your persistence to graduation? Open-ended, only for those who mark alumni or graduated. And did your ability to earn CPL affect your choice in attending your college or university? And this one is just a simple yes or no. So basically did the fact that the university gave you, let you earn it, recognize that credit, is that what made the difference in terms of choosing one school over the other? And then I'm old enough for that movie, so those of you that know, will know that movie best. But once surveys are conducted, my responses will be coded. I'll analyze the data, and see if it supports that, need for the agreement or not, and make a proposal, for further research. I already have lots of ideas for that. As I said, I had to stop going down the Alice rabbit holes, and keep focusing my research. And then, and policy study should go from here. Obviously, I'm not gonna be writing the policy myself. That's not my strongest suit, but I wanna give the people that can make the policy the data that they need to say, this is important, this will affect our state, and then nationally after that, because as I said, right now, there is no standard beyond what Kale has proposed as the standard, and they are the gold standard of what the best practices are. ACE, the American Council on Education, is great at accrediting and telling us that you can earn college credit for those military credits, things like Sophia, et cetera. But I want something that we can adopt here in Kentucky first, and then nationally, so that students, no matter where they are, where they're from, where they transfer to, where they're transferring in from, can all get that same quality of education. And not have to make up for not doing something the way that it was and intended, and not making them redo things that they've already done. Which discourages a lot of them from actually completing their degrees. Other than that, I'm open for questions, comments, insults, redirects.
No insults. But constructive.
Constructive criticisms. I think is the other one.
Let me end the slideshow, and that way you can see everyone's faces. So in the chat, and you didn't know this because you can't see it, in the chat, there are some resources that I put there, and they may be duplicated on, Liz's, presentation. I also linked the PowerPoint presentation. I'll also send that out in an email, as well as, the video once we're finished. There's at the bottom of that resource page, there are, so that's a list of resources. Eventually, we will have that on a portal, so everyone can access all those necessary resources that are working with credit for prior learning. But at the bottom, there are some articles and some research that Kale and some other areas, that Liz mentioned in her research as well. So feel free to check those out. I think that something that you pointed on, was key. I think that in general, this is just my comment, and you all can provide feedback if you like. I think there's a lot of universities that are wanting to do this, and they want to help their students. It's just, there is so much behind the scenes that requires coordination that, you know, we all know that the university, all universities, I haven't talked to anybody at any university that isn't, kind of overbooked, right? They've got so many things on their plate, and they want to do, I think we're all in education because we want to help people, but it's always something like, okay, we're going to tack this on, we're going to tack this on. So the dedication that EKU has made in creating a whole position of just dedicated to credit for prior learning, that speaks volumes of our dedication to our students. Now we have work to do. We have things that we can definitely improve on, but we are working with the Council on Post-Secondary Institution, as Liz referred to create some frameworks in place that we can share with other institutions, because we all need to work together to make sure that this transferability goes. And I believe, Lisa, you may know more about this. I believe there are some things coming out related to what we will take in from other universities as well. I think there's a statement or something. I'm not sure. I don't want to misquote or misspeak. So, but I know that what she's saying is accurate. I work with Lisa Cox and the Oats team a lot in routing and fielding some of these inquiries from students. And we have good people here and are on the way to good systems being in place. So any questions, comments? about the session?
Great
I
job.
want to thank you for coming and sharing your research. Liz and I have talked a
Thanks for
couple of
having me.
times about her research, and I think it's great because I don't have I mean, I do the research that's presented to me as I need it, but having somebody that I know between her and Chris Butcher here, he's doing some things with transfer, you know, some graduate level work. So being able to pick their ear has been very helpful in people that are out there doing the research, actually doing hardcore research. So I appreciate you in supporting this and coming and sharing your research with us.
And I do have on my reference slide, if you actually want to read some of the articles that I touched on. They're all in there. I have about 50 more if you want them.
Thank you all for coming.